This is the first annual Dash Beardsley Wake the Dead show, and our next guest, awesome guy, I tell you what. This guy, Scott Michaels, this is really cool stuff, man. He's the owner of Dearly Departed Tours, a really cool thing in Los Angeles, and Hollywood's original authority on celebrity deaths. Featured on CNN and E's 20 Most Terrifying Murders, Scott Michaels. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Well, some of you might know me from like having an online presence. I've had a website for a few years called findadeath.com, and I started doing that, documenting the ends of people's lives. Usually in a biography or a documentary, if somebody dies, that's the end of the story, and that's sort of where I start, because I want to know how all that happened. I wanted to know when they died, where they died. I want to see where they died. What were they wearing when they died? You know, who went to their funeral? What happened to their remains? Those are the kind of things that always really interested me, and the minutia of these incidents. I have no shame. I am inappropriate at all times, and it's just got me where I am, which I enjoy my life. I enjoy what I do. I'm very lucky. So I'm going to share with you some of the stories about some of the things I've seen, some of the things I've collected, because my office in Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood doubles as a gallery or a museum. I've collected all sorts of artifacts from these locations, and I have them assembled. I brought some of them along with me as well, that you'll be able to see as well. And so these are the things I've seen. This is the adventures I've been on, and that. So we'll start. So this is, now everyone knows Hollywood. This is a famous view of the Hollywood sign in Beechwood Canyon in California. I don't know if you can see it, but the Hollywood sign is front and center right above the road. And the sign was originally built in 1923 as a publicity stunt for a real estate company up in the hills called Hollywood Land. And it was an advertisement. That's all it was going to be. It was just a sign to advertise this development up in Hollywood. They call it Hollywood Land. Well, the company decided that they didn't want the sign anymore. Well, actually, I'm going to show you that. That's what it looked like when it was first built. It was a span of 2 American football fields. Each letter is 50 feet tall and 30 feet wide. So Hollywood Land Realty Company didn't want it anymore. So they left the word Hollywood up there, removed the land, and there it sat for another 30 years. Now back then you could still actually get up to the sign and touch the letters. Nowadays there's a very expensive security system up there, and if you try to get anywhere near it, they'll send a helicopter after you. And if you're busted, it's a $105 fine. Ask me how I found that out. But for me it was a write-off, so I was all right with that. But there was an actress. This was in 1932. Her name was this is what the sign ended up looking like. The sign was left there just to rot away, and in 1978, that is what it looked like. Letters were missing or only half standing. It was an eyesore. People ripped away parts of it. We had earthquakes. So that's what it looked like. So that's why in 1978, Hugh Hefner, the guy from Playboy, started a drive to have the sign replaced at the cost of $28,000 per letter. Hugh Hefner paid for the H, Andy Williams the W, Gene Autry the Y, and Alice Cooper paid for the last O in memory of his good friend Groucho Marx, who had died the year prior. But this is what it looked like right before it was being destroyed. This is what it looked like. There was somebody that documented every square inch of the sign, and it was hauled away, and a new sign has been built. What you see up there is no longer telephone poles with bits of plywood and sheet metal. Now it's all built. Steel girders and concrete posts and everything. It's not going anywhere anymore. But here she is. There was an actress in 1932. Her name was Lillian Millicent Entwistle. She went by the nickname Peg, and she grew up in London and became a very well-known actress on the London stage. She moved to New York, conquered Broadway, got married to an actor named Robert Keith, and the two of them moved to Hollywood to be in the films. She was put under contract with RKO Studios almost immediately. Things were really going her way. Then they made an abrupt U-turn. RKO put her in about a half a dozen films. She ended up on the cutting room floor of each of those films, so they dropped her contract. It turns out that her husband, Robert Keith, had a 5-year-old son from a previous relationship she didn't know about. And according to their documents, divorce documents, he was physically abusive. So she moved in with her uncle, who did have a house that's still up there in Beechwood Canyon, a little tiny bungalow that actually overlooks the sign, but it's actually about 3/4 of a mile downhill, quite a steep hill from where the sign is. But she was broke, depressed, she had no job, her relationship had ended. So on the night of September 16th, 1932, Peg wrote out a note to her uncle and left it there saying, "I'm sorry, I should have done this a long time ago. It would have saved everyone a lot of pain." She signed it only with her initials, P.E. Then she climbed up the hill all the way to the top of the 50-foot tall letter H and dove to her death. The only person that's ever been documented to have jumped off the Hollywood sign, becoming very famous in a way she never possibly could have foreseen. Now the sign is surrounded by a very sophisticated alarm system, and if you try to get anywhere near it, as I mentioned to you before, they'll send a helicopter after you. This is me at the bottom of the sign waving. You can't barely see it. But I did go, and sure as anything, the helicopters came, but I got to touch the H and the O. And then I thought, oh, there we are. And but the rumor of Peg Entwistle haunting the Hollywood sign, Peg's favorite scent was gardenias. And we're talking about the desert up there. There's rattlesnakes up there, and it's in a place where flowers flourish. And the rangers up there do say they can smell the gardenia smell of her perfume up there. And just as for something curious, those are the letters there. There's actually a lake up there. Lake Hollywood is in view of the Hollywood Dam way up in the hills. That's the lake, and that's downtown Hollywood out in front of it. If you ever saw the movie Earthquake, that's the dam that broke and flooded Hollywood. It was the Lake Hollywood Dam. And just a piece of trivia, the Hollywood sign does have an address. And that's it, 3800 Mount Lee Drive. That's the Hollywood sign's address. I'd be curious if we sent it a picture. And also, remember I told you Robert Keith, her husband, had a 5-year-old boy from a previous relationship? That 5-year-old boy's name was Brian Keith. Remember him? He played Uncle Bill on the TV show Family Affair, who, interestingly, killed himself about 10 years ago when he was diagnosed with cancer. 6 months after his daughter Daisy was diagnosed with cancer and killed herself. So it's interesting that they weren't related by blood, but Peg Entwistle and her two stepchild and step-grandchild, all died of suicide. So just an irony there. Now, to give you an idea of my own background, just please bear with me for a minute, but I'll give you an idea of why I got into what I did. I grew up in Detroit, and Detroit is a colorful place to live. It was an interesting place to grow up in the 60s and the 70s, and it's all become very notorious as far as what's become of it and all the ruins of Detroit. And it was interesting to go through that phase. It started long before I was born, but I was there for sort of the most dramatic parts of it. This is the corner that I grew up on, actually, just there. And people got killed in front of my house a lot because of accidents. It was a heavy traffic corner. So that's me and my brother and my sisters. That's all we would do is get on our knees and stare out on the couch and watch all the accidents happen out in front of the house they have, especially at winter time when all the roads are frozen. It was just really interesting. It's what we did. We were exposed to that. Now, my mom, when she was raising us, my mother was a homemaker. She worked her butt off raising us 4 kids while my dad was away at Chrysler doing what he did. So my mom had to figure out ways to keep herself occupied, and she created mosaics. It's only until I got really a lot older that I realized what she was having us do, and it wasn't contrived. She made a mosaic of the 3 kings, all out of glass. And it was all this beautiful glass. And but I never even thought about it until later on. She said, "I need some red glass. Go outside and get some off the road," because of all the accidents. So these people were, when taillights were really red glass and headlights were really, and mirrors were real glass, we'd go out there. It wasn't because we're going to do something weird to make these mosaics out of crash scenes, but we used what we had. So that's what my mom made. It was the 3 kings, but every one of those things is built with automobile crash glass. I know it's bizarre. But I think it paved the way for what I became, which we'll talk a little about in a second. But I always say, when I was a kid, this is just a picture of me and my cousin, but it was very Stand By Me. We would get on our Stingrays and we'd ride around to places where people died that we read about. It was something that we just thought was normal. We'd go to graveyards in our Stingrays, and it was just something that always interested me, and I never really got freaked out about it. And then one thing I remember, and I found this picture really recently, my family never discouraged it. My mother made me pose for this picture. That's me and my dad. And she had me bury my dad and put a little tombstone in front of him and had me pray for him. I love my family. Now I'm going to tell you, and I just want to show you really quickly, give an example. My grandma's house, where we used to spend a lot of time when we were kids, that's what it ended up looking like a couple of years ago, the burned out shack. This was me and my brother and my cousin standing in my grandmother's living room, and that's what it looked like when the ruins are still there. It was the light switch there, it matched up with that one. That's how I knew it was exactly where we were. My Aunt Anne's house, this is where we used to spend Christmases when I was a kid. And before it was gone completely, I had the opportunity to go through. There was the front room where the Christmas tree used to sit. And this is where, that was my cousin's bedroom over here. And it's just so weird to grow up and know these places, to be so familiar with these places, and then to go and visit them again. I want to see it. I definitely want to see it, but it's really sad. I used to work at this movie theater as a projectionist, the Madison, one of those grand old movie theaters in downtown Detroit. This was when it had the premiere for The Greatest Show on Earth, the Detroit premiere. That's what it sort of looked like right after I stopped working. It was all boarded up. The beautiful proscenium stage. That's what it ended up looking like. Now it's gone completely. So that just gave me, my past disintegrated in front of me, and it was something that fascinated me to watch. It's very sad, of course, but it sort of got me interested in what I'm doing. So I'm kind of all over the place with this thing, so bear with me. I'm just going to tell you some different stories about some of the stuff that I've done. Now, I worked with a girl who was obsessed with James Dean. And James Dean, I'm a really big fan of Dean. And she said she used to speak to Jimmy a lot. Well, I'm going to show you a couple of quick pictures. There's Jimmy at the beginning of Rebel Without a Cause. I found the exact location where that was shot. And I even had my little wind-up monkey toy with me, just like Jimmy did at the beginning of that movie. And on the morning Jimmy died, he picked up his car at Competition Motors. If you look behind him in that photograph, there's the pawn shop. It says Prescriptions. Now it's a pawn shop on the corner. That's still there. And the morning he died, he filled up his car in the exact same spot. So I'm a big James Dean fan. And now my friend, there's the location where he died. That's the crash scene. It's a couple hours north of Los Angeles. My friend Pam was weird. There's Jimmy, being the wacky guy he was. She spoke to James Dean on the Ouija board all the time. This is what she told me. And I've always been curious about it. I would never touch one again after this night. But she said she would come to work and she'd say, "What do you want to ask Jimmy?" And I'd say, "Well, I don't know. How's my grandfather?" or something like that, and she'd come back, "Oh, he's fine, and he says this and this and this," and she would come back with this really amazing information. And then she'd go to Jimmy's hometown, and she said she was on his grave, and she said James Dean came up on the motorcycle and gave her a ride on the motorcycle. And I'm like, "Oh, really? That's so fascinating." And I thought, well, I had a couple of days off. I'm going to go meet James Dean. So I said, hell, I'm up for it. So we drove to Fairmount, Indiana, where Jimmy was from, and she brought along her little Ouija board with her. So we got to Jimmy's grave, and there's always somebody. It's a little town. Fairmount, Indiana is a tiny little town, but James Dean's his big claim to fame, and there's somebody always there at James Dean's grave. So there's a little stone in front of the grave, and we sat there, and Pam got out her Ouija board, and I'd never been on one before. And when you're in touch with somebody and they're engaged. When your finger's on the planchette, it does like this figure eight sort of thing. And then, how are you? Fine. What's your name? Jame, that kind of stuff. It was all very quick. So Pam gets on it, and she goes, "Jimmy, are you here?" And it goes to yes. And he says, she spells out, "Hi, Pam and Scott." And she said, "Well, Scott wants to know." She asked me, "Do you want to ask anything?" I said, "Yeah." "Is he going to come visit?" And it said to concentrate. And someone else came up right at that moment, and we had to leave because it was just too, we didn't want to be with the Ouija board on James Dean's grave because that would look really bad. So she goes, "Let's go see where he was raised." So I hope that I did these the right way. There's the farmhouse. So when Jimmy lived in California with his father, when his mother passed away, Jimmy took his body back to Indiana. And then he stayed in Indiana, was raised by his aunt and uncle in that house. So Jimmy, when he was like 8 years old, had to take his mother's body by himself on a train from California to Indiana where she was buried. So I knew this house because I was a big fan, and there's Jimmy at the house when he was a little boy. So when we left James Dean's grave, Pam said, "Do you want to see the farmhouse?" I said, "Well, sure, yeah, I want to see the farmhouse." So we drove up into, and I think Pam's a couple of sandwiches short of a picnic anyway. Do you know what I mean? She's a bit of a nut, but I thought, what the hell? So she says, "Pull up into the driveway." I said, "No, we can't do that. The people live there." She goes, "No, it's okay. Pull in the driveway." So we did. And she gets out of the car and she goes upstairs pounding on the door. I said, "Oh shit, this is going to go so wrong." But then the guy that answered was Marcus and his wife Mary Lou. Marcus was James Dean. I knew him right away because this is Marcus with Jimmy. He still lives in the house where Jimmy was born, or where Jimmy grew up. He and his wife Mary Lou live in that house. And they said, "Pam, hi!" And they grabbed her, and I was like, they know her. So they invited us in, and we got to sit in the living room watching America's Funniest Home Videos, drinking lemonade in the room where James Dean grew up. And they brought down like a pair of his jeans to show us. I couldn't believe they embraced this the way they did, because it's such a small town, and the Winslows are such nice people, but they're very quiet people, and you don't expect them to embrace something this so huge, but they did, and they were really nice. And also their kids came downstairs, and I said right away they could have come to Hollywood and made a fortune just being James Dean's nephews, because they looked like Jimmy, and they should have, because they would have done quite well just by the relation. But this was so that's Marcus and Jimmy. So Pam said, "Let's go back to the grave." So we went back to the grave. By then it's about 11 o'clock, and it's in the middle of it's dark, and it's in the middle of nowhere. There's no lights or anything like that. And we get there, and we're sitting on the rock in front of Jimmy's grave. And I'm sitting there, and Pam's over there, and she gets the Ouija board again, and hi Pam and Scott, and then how can we help you? And it did spell out the word concentrate, and right as it spelled that, a motorcycle pulled into this dirt road cemetery in the middle of nowhere, and he's weaving through all these little tiny roads, and he comes to a stop with the light blasting right in my face. And I'm like, here we go. This is going to be a ride. So the guy gets off the bus. It's not Jimmy. It's a guy all in black. He's wearing black leather, black jacket, black pants, the boots, the everything, except his hair is salt and pepper. He said, "What are you guys doing here?" And in the meantime, I'd taken the Ouija board and I'd stuck it behind Jimmy's tombstone because I didn't want to get busted at night with a Ouija board on Jimmy's tombstone. But so he's walking around and he walks to behind it and he sees the Ouija board. He says, "What are you doing with this?" And Pam says, "I talked to Jimmy on it." She goes, "You don't talk to Jimmy on this." He says, "You talk to Lucifer on this." He starts screaming, "Jimmy is seated at the right hand of the Father." And he started quoting Bible verses. And I'm just sitting there with like a deer in headlights. I didn't know what to do. And he goes, "What do you got to say about this?" And I said, "Right now I'm a little freaked out." And he goes, "Okay." And he gets down, sits down right in front of me. I'm on the rock. He sits on the other side of me, and he puts the Ouija board on his knees, and he puts the Ouija board on my knees. He goes, "Put your hands right there." He says, "You're freaked out now? Wait a second." And I said, no, actually, I'm quite good. I'm good. We're getting out of here, and we drove back to Chicago like that minute. Not with our tail between my legs, but it was just sort of, I'm ready to be done here. And I asked Pam the next day, I said, "When you talk to Jimmy, ask him what the was that all about? What was that all about?" And she came back and said, "Jesus sent him." That's what Jimmy said, that Jesus sent him to see us. So take that for what it's worth. But that was an interesting story, and I'd never touch a Ouija board ever again. Okay, just quick stories of interest, if it's interesting, I hope. I moved to London for a while, and I lived there for several years. And during that time, I lived very close to where Diana lived. Now, Diana was killed in Paris, and at that time, my residency didn't come quite through yet, so I couldn't go to Paris to see the tunnel. But this is the tunnel where Diana died. It was 1997, August 30th, 1997. But I was in London for the funeral. And I don't know if you guys remember it very well, but it was insane, the amount of outpouring that went out for that funeral. That's the home that she lived in Kensington Palace. And it was insane, the amount of flowers that came out for that were given there. People were just, Britain is not that way. People in England don't, cry like that. It wasn't like that. But Diana sort of gave them permission to go ahead and do that. And the country just fell apart for a couple of days. And it was a fascinating time to be there. And to be down that street street and watch Diana's coffin proceed by. And you could hear a pin drop and people weeping in the streets, and all you hear is the horses clip-clopping and Diana going by. It was pretty emotional. But this is something that, you know, a lot of people didn't see, the cranes above the casket, you know, as you're going down the mall. And it was an interesting thing. In the aftermath, of course, when all these flowers were just left there, that was the big question. What are they going to do with all these flowers after she's gone? And, you know, so what they did was they gathered them all up and they made them into mulch. And they took them to Althrop, where Diana's buried, and they put it on the island. These are the ladies that were brought there that day. And all they did was collect all the flowers and chop up all the flowers and take them to Althrop House, where Diana's buried on that little island. And I eventually did get to Paris, and that's the actual post. And there's that large dent in it. And when you're standing there by that pillar, the 13th pillar in the Alma Tunnel in Paris, and you can actually put your hand in that spot where that actually happened, and you think, we all lived through that. We were there for that. And I think it all started with that little chunk in the cement is really quite profound. Some of the other locations I visited, of course, this was Jeffrey Dahmer in Milwaukee, the Oxford Apartments, which are long gone now. This was the Oxford Apartments where Jeffrey Dahmer killed his victims. And actually going there and, you know, trying to match up photographs as well to the way it looked now. It's long gone, but there's the stairway in the back where they were pulling those vats down with all those people in them, and that's me standing in the back with my dearly departed, inappropriate, I told you I was inappropriate, dearly departed banner. John Denver died in Monterey. John Denver was driving a plane that he assembled himself. It wasn't poor flying that did it, he ran out of gas. Those particular planes that he put together himself have 2 gas tanks in them. And he was in the process of switching from one gas tank to the other, and he got distracted, and the plane ran out of fuel. Although it still had a tank of fuel, the plane ran out, and it hit the Pacific Ocean and fell into a million pieces. And I've got one here, if you guys wanted to see it. I'll leave this stuff over here for you to look at if you'd like to see it after I speak. But this is a large piece of John Denver's airplane. When I got it, it still smelled like fuel, actually, which is pretty weird. But that's what I do. I'm weird, right? I'm gauging reactions now. How's this going? Okay, another thing that I've acquired over the years, Rock Hudson, the sex symbol. He was the virile man, the sex symbol. And he was a virile man and a sex symbol, but he was gay, and a lot of people didn't know that. And Rock Hudson had a very famous house called the Tower up in Beverly Hills, a gorgeous house. And when he was diagnosed with AIDS, it wasn't until he was nearly dead that it was actually made public, but Rock Hudson put a face to the disease of AIDS, and nobody really knew what it was before, and he brought a lot of attention to it. Something I found really curious, a lot of his friends wouldn't visit him, a lot of friends wouldn't go into the room, because at that time nobody knew. Nobody knew how you got it. People walked around in hazmat costumes practically. I remember bartenders wouldn't touch glasses, they wore gloves, they wouldn't even, because nobody knew how it was going to be transferred to people. The one person that didn't have any problem of Rock's friends that went there was Pat Boone. Pat Boone on the right was a good friend of Rock's, which is interesting because Rock was, an openly gay man. A lot of people think he was in the closet. He really wasn't. Rock was, he wasn't in the closet. I mean, everyone knew. And Gavin MacLeod, who was also a good friend of his, Captain Stubing from the Love Boat, and both of these guys are really enthusiastic Christians, and as soon as Pat Boone went in to see Rock, he didn't put any gloves on. He went right up to Rock Hudson and hugged him and held his hand, and they prayed for him on his deathbed. And they did the whole "get demon cast me out" sort of thing. They thought he was possessed or possessed by something. And they did the whole pretty hardcore experiment, or not experiment, but ceremony it would have been, which I just find really fascinating. But Rock did indeed die in 1985. That's the bed that he died in 1985, in the beautiful king-size bed in his room in California. And actually, I bought that bed. And So I brought a piece of it anyway. This is actually the foot base from Rock Hudson's bed that he died in. So yet another souvenir that's in my shop. I have that post actually. Oh, there's me with it, isn't it? No, it isn't. There we are. That's me with the actual bedpost in my shop. Now, okay, some of you I know I spoke to earlier know who Divine was. Divine was a 350-pound man that played women in movies. A lot of people don't know he's the first person to ever portray Jacqueline Kennedy on film. And as far as I know, the only person to actually ever eat dog poop in a movie. If you've ever seen the movie Pink Flamingos, that's really what made him famous. And Divine was in Los Angeles. Hairspray had just come out. The movie you just saw, he played Ricky Lake's mom in Hairspray. That's him next to Debbie Harry. And he was just enjoying mainstream success. And he was living in Hollywood at the Regency Hotel. He was just about to start filming a show called Married with Children. He was going to be a regular on Married with Children. And it was March of 1988 that Divine died in his room at the Regency Hotel. That's the hotel after it was boarded up. And that's actually, does it show up in that last picture? No, that number that you see, that's mine. I have that now, but it was above the door right there. I know if you could just, I know, it's what I do. And I'm proud of it. I probably shouldn't be, but I am. So this particular night, I had just left, and I'm not kidding, I just left Phyllis Diller's house that day, and I was heading over to this place, and I saw, because I was a big Divine fan, I saw the security guard parked in front of it. So I slipped the guard $20, and I said, "Can you look the other way when I go into this place?" He said, "Sure." So I went in. Oh, I wish we could see these better. Can you see these at all? It's all so dark. That's the inside of the doors. And, okay, so I went into the room where Divine died. That's the room inside that Divine died in. And, are you being kind? Oh, look at that. There we go. So that's perfect. Thank you very much for that. So that's the inside of the room, and so you can't really tell very much the patio there, but the patio it was ready for destruction. So I went and asked the security guard if he'll let me go and come back in 15 minutes, so I went and got a toolbox, and I got a buddy. And you see that door, I decided I wanted that door for my collection, the door to Divine's death room. So I did. We got it off, and there's us loading it on top of my Jeep and driving down Sunset Boulevard to get to my house. But I had Divine's death door. And eventually the hotel is gone now, gone forever. But one of the other things I do, if I happen to go to a place where somebody has passed away, it's not out of disrespect, I promise you. I have to kind of go to the same place where it all happened. So that's me actually lying in the spot where Divine actually died. So to me, it's important to do that. So I experience it. I see what that person saw for the very last moment of their lives. And that is something that I quite, I don't know, I like doing that. And it's not like I'm a ghoulish glee, but I guess it's ghoulish glee because I like doing it. Okay, Marilyn Monroe. A quick little story about Marilyn Monroe. There is her with her little dog Muff, who Frank Sinatra gave her that little dog. She named it Muff after the Mafia. It's a little nickname. Now Marilyn is actually posing there in the very outfit she was buried in. And when she died in 1962, Marilyn is buried in that dress. She had 3 dresses. They were by the designer Pucci. The other 2 were auctioned off when her estate was auctioned off. You can see what the other 2 looked like. But that's the one that she was wearing in that photograph, and that's the one that she's actually buried in. And I had the opportunity to meet the guy that helped embalm Marilyn Monroe. And he was a really interesting man to talk to. This is Marilyn's funeral, and his name is Alan Abbott. And this is Marilyn, and that's Mr. Abbott right there. And he worked for the mortuary. He was in charge of, he hired Pinkerton security to stay in the cemetery overnight before Marilyn's funeral. He also told me that Joe DiMaggio did not spend the whole night. Everyone says, oh, he spent the night next to her casket, you know, with his hand on her casket. No, he said he was there for a couple hours, but he left. He didn't stay the whole night. So it's a romantic myth that DiMaggio did. And I have no doubt that he loved her. I mean no disrespect, but it's just one of those things. And so I got to speak with Mr. Abbott for a while, and he told me the story about Marilyn's embalming. Now this is a little bit graphic, no pictures, but I'll tell you what happened. So when Marilyn died, when she got to the cemetery, she was post-autopsy. That means her chest had been opened up, and her head had been opened up because they took out her brain to weigh it. And so she did not look very nice when they got her to the cemetery, and she didn't have her boobs because her chest had been opened up, so it was like concave. So her assistant brought along Marilyn's falsies. The story was, the falsies, for you guys that don't know, up there, there are these foam pieces with little dips in them that are supposed to look like boobs, with little nipple marks on them. Now, Marilyn would wear a bra, and she put the falsies in front of the bra under her sweater to make it look like she wasn't wearing a bra, if that makes any sense. It was to make it look like her boobs were, I guess, a bit more perky. Anyway, her assistant brought the falsies to the mortuary, and they put Marilyn in the bra and put the falsies in the bra, and the woman at the mortuary says, no, that's not Marilyn Monroe at all. So she walked over to the tissue drawer. She started taking tissue out. She took the falsies, threw them in the garbage, and just crammed Marilyn's bra with one of those big bullet bras. Remember those? Crammed it with Kleenexes, and when Marilyn was there, and there they were out in projects. Now that's Marilyn Monroe, and that's how Marilyn was buried. Now, since she was post-autopsy, she had a lot of, this is technical, so it's called slippage when you have no muscle control anymore. So this skin was sort of loose. So what they did was they grab it by the back and they tighten it up, and then they sew it up back there because it makes her look better, and it did. And so when they did that, had to do the sewing up, somebody cut a piece of her hair off and threw it in the garbage. Well, Alan Abbott, the mortuary guy, he's a man after my own heart, because he's walking around. He says, no one's looking. So he grabbed the falsies, and then in the middle of the falsies was this lock of hair. And that's what Alan has now. So Marilyn's falsies and his lock of hair. And it was like to be right there and think I could clone Marilyn from one of those. Now that would be cool. Let's see what is up next. So that's my little Marilyn. Oh, okay, here's something silly. I know that some of you guys are horror film fans here. This is just something, a different look on something that's interesting. The Nightmare on Elm Street house, which is located in Hollywood. That's what it looked like in the movie. This is what it looked like in real life. A couple of years ago, you can see it was up for sale, and I happened to go there in an open house. This is just to get you a little weird glimpse into something that's very Hollywood. If you saw the movie, you saw the way the house looked on the outside. Well, on the inside, it wasn't so much. That's what the door looked like in the movie. That's what it looks like in real life. They did a pretty good job with that. Once you get in, this is what it looked like. There was an alien baby. I don't get that at all down there. This is what the house looked like. It was not at all like it looked like in the movie, but that is very Hollywood. And going up to the upstairs, they just gave us free reign of the house. These people that lived in it, they'd been there for a very long time. And they probably, got the house for like 20 grand in the 50s. And when it went on the market, you'll see the price in a second. But somebody, this is actually the view that's the dearly departed bus, that's my bus. From the window that Nancy, remember she used to look out and see Johnny Depp across the street in the movie? That's the same window that they filmed it in. Johnny Depp's house is right over there. And this is the backyard. This was the old fetid water. I mean, it was just stagnant water with bugs in it. Just really gross. It was sold, I don't even know for how much. Something like $400,000. But actually, that was Johnny Depp's house in the movie. It should have been sold for $400,000 because that's all it was worth. And I know that sounds like a lot of money, but really in Los Angeles, it's not a whole lot of money. The asking price was $1.1 million, and they did get it. No, 1 million. What is that, 1.1? No, you know what I mean. You can see it right there. But that was the asking price for it. And the woman who bought it, she knocked down the entire house except for those 3 panels that you see right there. The entire house is completely wiped out except for the roof, the front, and the lower front. And it still looks the same from the street, but it's a completely different house now. So there you are. Oh, what's this? Oh, okay, another one of these weird things that I own. A.A. Milne, the author of Winnie the Pooh. On the right, the blonde guy, second from the right, that is Brian Jones of the Rolling Stones. Brian Jones was the founding member of the Rolling Stones. Brian Jones came up with the name the Rolling Stones. And Brian Jones was kicked out of the group. He was fired from being a Rolling Stone. And he lived in this house, which is the same house that A.A. Milne lived in, Winnie the Pooh guy and Brian Jones. Except Brian Jones drowned in that swimming pool in 1969. And a couple of years ago, well, I'll tell you, that's what I have. That's a piece of the pool, which is also right here. So This is the piece of the swimming pool that the founder of the Rolling Stones drowned in. So there you are. You can come up and see it if you want. Actually, to me, this stuff is historic. To me, this is important. This is history. It might be just a stupid old tile to a lot of people, and I get that. You know, to some people it is. I don't get stamp collecting. It's never been my thing. This is my thing. So yeah. What's this? Oh, Dean Martin. Okay, funny Dean Martin story. I'll tell you this. I told you this is going to be all over the place. Dean Martin used to hang out at this place called the Hamburger Hamlet in Hollywood. He'd go there every Sunday at 1 o'clock. You could set your watch by him. He always sat in the same seat, so he'd watch the baseball game on the television screen. So I used to take friends up there. Let's go see Dean Martin. We never bothered him. You know, we just wanted to make going to get a hamburger a lot more fun. Go watch Dean Martin. One day I decided I wanted to meet him. So I got there early, like 15 minutes before he got there. I went to the bar and I very, very carefully chose the one seat at the bar that blocked his table of the baseball game. And it worked perfectly. He walked in, he sat down. A couple of seconds later, I got a tap on my shoulder, and there's Dean. He's got this big TV screen, you know, thick glasses. Hey, big guy, do you mind moving over so I can see the game? So I said, yeah, sure, Mr. Martin. So a minute later, the waiter comes over and said, Mr. Martin would like to buy you a beer. So that's the beer bottle, because I saved it. They weren't going to let me out with it, but it's like, I'm not leaving without it, and you're going to have to drag me out of here. So I did, and I got it, and I got to go over and talk to him, because after he came to me first. So I could, Mr. Martin, it's a pleasure, and he worked with Sharon Tate, and he worked with Marilyn Monroe, and I talked to him for a minute. He had no revelations. He was just being polite, but I got to talk to Marilyn Monroe about her to somebody that worked with her, Sharon Tate to somebody that worked with her. So it was kind of a cool opportunity. Again, moving all over the place. A piece of the Hindenburg, when one of the most famous air accidents, conspiracy theorists would say it wasn't an accident, it was actually plotted. It amazes me that I got on an airplane with two really iconic pieces of horrible air crashes. I took them with me. I'm talking about that. But it worked, and I got here. And I'll show you, if you get an opportunity to come up. This is a chunk of the Hindenburg that I owned. There's a piece of it over in my little booth that shows exactly what it is. But this is from the staterooms. These are the ladders in the rooms at the Hindenburg. So this was actually on the wreckage. It's like a carbonite sort of. It came from an ambulance driver. I got that about 25 years ago from an ambulance driver that was there. He picked up some people, and he thought, well, I'll just take a piece of it with me for history, and it's history. And now everyone's going to see it because they can see this little tiny. You can touch the Hindenburg. I mean, how cool is it? Did you think you're going to do that to me? You know what else I forgot to tell you too? The Hollywood sign, the original Hollywood sign, when it said Hollywood Land, the one that Peg Entwistle actually jumped off of, I have a piece of the letter H here too. So if you want to actually touch a piece of the actual letter H, this is the very one that she jumped off of in 1932. It's here to see. So this is my little weird way of preserving history. I feel like I keep having to defend myself. So sorry. I realize that you're probably my people. The Ambassador Hotel, one of the most infamous events in Los Angeles, in world history, really. I think it's changed the world. The assassination of Bobby Kennedy. And the Coconut Grove was also well known for the Coconut Grove was the club within the Ambassador Hotel where everybody started out. I mean, Joan Crawford was a dancer there. Rudolph Valentino was a dancer there. All the big bands, Bing Crosby, Bob Hope, they all started there. Judy Garland, they all played the Grove. And it's that event in 1968 where Bobby Kennedy gave his last speech when he was on with the Democratic presidential primary, and he said from that very podium, let's go on to Chicago and we'll win there. And then Bobby got off the stage. There's the stage that Bobby was on. Right where that gentleman standing is where Bobby was. He walked off the stage, went through that door into the pantry where he was killed. Actually, he was shot there, and he died 24 hours and 24 minutes afterwards. He was transferred to 2 different hospitals. And when I got a chance to go through the Ambassador Hotel, which is gone now, it is gone forever, I got a piece of the linoleum that Bobby actually landed on. The Ambassador, it makes me sick to think this happened. The Ambassador Hotel was demolished, and that was the ruin of it. Oh, that's the school. Okay. That's what they built in its place. The Ambassador Hotel, they tore it down to build a school that looks exactly like the Ambassador Hotel. I know. I mean, they could have done something, but they didn't. But a piece of the Ambassador Hotel, I happen to have. Yeah, it's all that's gone. I mean, this place is gone. Nobody can touch this building ever again. But if you want to, you can. I mean, this is history, and these are things you can touch. I found this building in Chicago called the Chicago Tribune Building, and outside the building were these pieces of the Parthenon, pieces of the Taj Mahal, and these are places I'll never get to. But there you are. You can touch these things, and it's history. Now, okay, here's another one. Jane Mansfield. Beautiful Jane Mansfield. Are you guys all familiar with, some of you may not know who Jane was. Jane was sort of a knockoff Marilyn Monroe. Big boobs, big blonde hair. Oops, my boobs fell out. She'll do anything for a bit of attention. And I always joke that she would hold a press conference for a fart. If you watch Law and Order, Jane's daughter, Mariska Hargitay, is on Law and Order. That's her on the right. Olivia Benson is Jane's daughter. And Jane, when she married, her father is a man named Mickey Hargitay. She got married to a Mr. Universe. This beautiful blonde pinup girl got married to Mr. Universe. And they were a beautiful couple. And Jane said, I'll marry you to Mickey, who used to work with Mae West, actually. That's how she met him. And she said, I'll marry you, but you got to build me a big pink house with a heart-shaped swimming pool. So he did, on Sunset Boulevard. There's Jane and her beautiful house on Sunset Boulevard in her pink Cadillac, because it's what she did. And this is Jane's heart-shaped swimming pool. And in 1967, June 29th of 1967, Jane was performing in Biloxi, Mississippi at the Gus Stevens Supper Club. And this was Jane on the last night of her life. On their way from Biloxi to New Orleans, Jane was in the middle. Her boyfriend, Jane was on the right, her boyfriend in the middle. The driver was the nightclub owner's son, and her 3 children, including Mariska, who was 3 years old, were sleeping in the back seat of the car. The driver was distracted by something in the distance and wasn't paying attention to where he was going, and they went directly under a truck that was parked on the side of the road. He had no idea. A lot of people think that Jane was decapitated, and she actually wasn't. That's an urban legend. She died of a cranial avulsion, which is this part of her. It was like, if I was wearing this cap, this is it. This is exactly, if I took it off, there'd be nothing there. That's what happened to Jane. And if you want, I'll show you later. I couldn't show you now, but I'll show you the pictures if you want to see later. But this is what actually the crash ended up looking like. It's amazing that those 3 kids came out with just a couple of scratches. There is a blonde wig, Jane's wig, on the head, right up on the dashboard there, and that's where the rumor came from. Everyone swore they saw her head sitting there, and it wasn't. It was just a wig. But I met a guy who owns the car a couple of months ago. He said, "You got to come and see the car." And I heard about it, so I wouldn't hesitate. And I said, "Yeah, take me to the car." So he showed me the car, and it's all under wraps in this garage. And there's me actually sitting in the very seat. That's what it looked like the night of the accident. You could see, it's a bit gruesome, I apologize. But I couldn't believe the car. The mirror's there, the dials are still there. And this is almost 50 years later that this thing is still intact. And there was even in my hand there's glass from the windshield on the floor of the car. It's like the accident just happened, except it happened, almost 50 years ago. And they said, "Do you want to sit in the seat?" It's like, oh yeah, I mean, it's what I do. So I went, and you're sitting right there. And I remember I saw the spot where Jane's knees hit the glove box, when she was killed. And to be sitting there right then, and he explained to me what happened. And he was right in front of me, and he said, "Jane was sitting here," and they went under it, and it went just like that. And he did this right to my head. It was like flash. I had this flash, and it was goosebumps. It was like I felt right then and there. That was the closest I ever got, I think, to actually experiencing some kind of weird vibe from any of this stuff. I shouldn't say that's all of it, but that was one time where it did happen. Jane's beautiful house on Sunset Boulevard was owned by Engelbert Humperdinck for about 25 years. He couldn't find a buyer. And you can see they started tearing away all the windows, and the doors were being taken away at that point. And there was the grotto, Jane's grotto. They were harvesting all the full-size trees. That's what they do in California. If you're going to get a house torn down, they take the trees, full-size trees. They'll come and get them, and they plant them somewhere else. And it's because people pay a lot of money for that. Jane's beautiful barbecue. That's what it looked like when I was back there. That was all that was left. That beautiful barbecue, that over-the-top pink house, and there was that barbecue. There's Jane by her waterfall. that waterfall was, and to be there, because somebody told me it was a rainy day, it was like January, and said, if you want to go see this, you better go see this, and there's a tunnel under Sunset Boulevard, because it's kind of a residential area. So I went under this tunnel, we hopped a fence, and to be back there in this rainy day, and it was muddy, and there was nobody there, because nobody does anything in LA when it rains. And to be back in this, it was really spooky. It was like being in the ruins of some, Aztec something or other that had been grown over. And it was wild. And the heart-shaped swimming pool I showed you earlier, this was what it looked like that day. That's the heart-shaped hole in the ground. And all that's left of Jay Mansfield's swimming pool is this. That's it. This is all that's left of Jane's pool. So you can come up and see that too. Or you can come and take my tour. Let's see, what else have I got going on here? Okay. Oh, and there was another thing. Jane's death didn't just stop there. It changed things. And if you're ever driving the road and you're behind a semi, you'll see the Mansfield bar. That's what it's called. That orange striped bar right down there, that's the nickname for that. It's called the Mansfield bar, because that's not going to happen again. Nobody's going to drive under the back of a truck. And that's because of Jane. So there you are. Now, my particular interest, the Manson murders, that's sort of my big deal. And if you ever see, we did a documentary, of course I sell them, it's called The 6 Degrees of Helter Skelter. And it's a geographic retelling of the Tate LaBianca murders from 1969. 2 nights, 7 people passed away at the hands of the Manson family. Interestingly enough, Manson didn't have anything to do with those 7 murders. He was not present at either of those places. He physically was not involved in those murders. Mentally, yes, but not physically. The victims, the total Tate LaBianca victims were these 9 people, because there were one person a few weeks before and another person a few weeks afterwards. But Sharon Tate, top center, of course, she's probably the most famous of them all. And as you heard me talking to Eric Roberts a little while ago, this was the house up on where this Jeff Franklin, this producer, lives now. It was a modest 3-bedroom ranch-style home on the hill in Beverly Hills. Was destroyed, 1 kitchen wall left, and they built a 17,000 square foot Mediterranean villa around it. Since they left 1 kitchen wall and they built this massive house, it counts in California as a remodel. So they got a tax break for that one. And the house 3 doors down from the house where the Tate murders happened is the one that's supposedly haunted by Sharon Tate, which is, there's certainly there's certainly hauntings up there. He shows up, the guy who owns it, David Oman, he's been on Haunted History, Ghost Collectors, Ghost Hunters, Paranormal Something, and da-dee-da-dee-da-dee-da goes on. So the house has definitely got some crazy stuff going on in it. And this is poor Sharon Tate. Now, and this is Jay Sebring, the second most famous of the victims. Jay he created the Beach Boys pompadours. He created the Jim Morrison flowing locks. He cut hair for Bruce Lee, Rock Hudson, Eddie Fisher, you name it, Warren Beatty. They all were clients of Jay Sebring. He was like the first men's hairstylist that really, really made it big in Hollywood. And the morning of August 9th, 1969, they were murdered in front of this sofa, the fireplace that you see right there. The house on Cielo Drive, most famously, at the end, after Sharon was killed, Susan Atkins. Susan Atkins was the most ferocious of them. As Sharon was 8.5 months pregnant, begging for her life, Susan Atkins looked her in the eyes and said, "Look, bitch, I have no mercy for you, and you're going to die, and there's nothing you can do about it." And that's what happened to poor Sharon. Then Susan Atkins took a cloth and dipped it in Sharon's blood and wrote the word pig on the front door of the house. And that's what it looked like. Susan Atkins ironically died of brain cancer 5 years ago, and asked to be released on compassionate grounds, which is just sort of interesting, isn't it? There you go. The house itself was also torn down in 1993. The house on Cielo Drive, you can see, was taken down. And I spoke to a workman up there, and I said to the workman, "Can I have a brick, please?" This is what I do. And he goes, "There aren't any bricks. There's flags shown from the fireplace. And if you want to leave you one outside after I'm done for the day." So I went back afterwards, and he didn't. But he did point out that pile of rocks. And that's my buddy on the inside, and I took the picture on the outside, and I filled the back of my car with these rocks. I have one here. So, it's what I do. This is the Ambassador one. It was the Tate one that's over there. But yeah, so I have that in my shop as well. And interestingly enough, though, if I ever have psychic mediums come into my shop, that's where they had, they just know something's up with that particular piece. And so there you are. Now, on to something lighter. American Horror Story ripped us off. There you are. Love the show. But season 1, if you ever watched the show American Horror Story, which I loved and I watched, they reached out to me before they started production about using our vehicles in the bus. They wanted to use the bus, and I said, sure, yeah. So we talked about it back and forth. Then they stopped calling. And when the show came out came a tour called the Eternal Darkness Tour, the murder tour of Los Angeles. So they, I thought, well, first of all, ripped us off, I guess I shouldn't say that. Borrowed very heavily from Dearly Departed Tours is what they did. And I figured if I didn't get that angry, because if they looked up murder tour in LA, they're going to find us anyway. So they did. But they did, Fox did invite me to speak at the DVD launch party that was held at Hollywood Cemetery. And I got to do tours with the guy that played the tour guide on American Horror Story. I don't know how long I've been up here, so I am going to tell you, this is my office in Hollywood on Sunset Boulevard. This is all that stuff that I showed you today and a lot of other stuff that's on display in my shop. There's all kinds of crazy energy riding around in that house, but we maintain it on a regular basis with sage and things like that. But yeah, if you ever were in Hollywood and you want to see some of this stuff, I invite you to come up and check it out as well. But we do have it, and we do sell it too, on Sunset Boulevard. Now, I don't know how much time I spent up here. I don't know how much time I had. How much? Okay, 45 minutes. I'll tell you one more quick story. This is a ghost story, okay? The Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel on Hollywood Boulevard opened in 1927. The hotel, almost everything in Hollywood was built in 1927. The Chinese Theater, the beautiful Hollywood Bank Building on the corner, which is also crazy haunted. 1927 was the year in Hollywood to build stuff. And in the 50s, the Roosevelt Hotel added on these cabanas in the back, which this looks like apartments right around inside the pool. They call them cabanas. And a friend of mine worked at the Roosevelt Hotel. She worked in banquets. And everyone that worked there has walkie-talkies. And traditionally, when you go to a hotel, after you check out, they send a security guard in the hotel to do a sweep of the hotel to make sure you don't leave your charger behind or something like that. And in this particular day, this happened about 8 years ago, I think it was, everyone that was on the walkie-talkie heard screaming. And they knew who it was that did it, so they knew where she was heading because she was doing the sweep. So they went up there and they found this particular security guard on the floor outside this particular room, weeping. When she finally got it together to tell the story, she said she walked into the room, and inside the room is the bed. And above the bed was a man, and he was floating, hovering over the bed, straight up. He had no feet. They weren't severed. They were just floating there, and his feet sort of faded into nothing. He was wearing pajamas. He had his throat cut, and he was bleeding from the front of him, and his face was black and blue. And she said she walked in the room, and then the man was, like if you were her walking in, he was facing the other direction, and he just turned and looked right at her in the eye. And that's when she flipped and left the room. And it was one of those she left and never came back again kind of a thing. And she didn't. So we rented the room. We wanted to see. But apparently after this particular incident, it was, people were leaving that room. I guess they were doing some plumbing work. And I guess if you do plumbing work, sometimes that sparks stuff up, especially with water. Maybe paranormal activity can increase when you're doing some sort of structural work like that. And so we rented it. There's my friend Barry and Victoria Gross. Kenny Kingston, the psychic, lovely man, just passed away a couple of years ago. He started that whole psychic hotline business. Kenny was doing it first, and he's a sweet guy. Long before that, Dionne Warwick did it. Long before that. Anyway, but we did rent the room, and Kenny and most everyone got the vibe that there was a woman that was hurt very seriously in that room, and that man did not die in that room, but the man comes back to that room because of the feelings he feels for that particular person or that particular incident. He was killed somewhere else. But take this picture for what it's worth. I found it really interesting. I took a picture of another friend of mine. His name is Mark Nelson. He's a pretty well-known psychic in our part of the world. And I took this picture of Mark. And, oh, I wish you could see this. Damn, you can't really see it. Shit, you can't see it, can you? No. No, you can't. Damn it. There is a picture of the images right there. That's really anticlimactic. Let's see if I can raise this up and you can see it a little bit better. No, you can't. No, that's embarrassing. I thought I got through it pretty well. but you can't really see the guy, and I'm sorry. Oh, do you think you can?
You can try to close the door for a second.
Oh, it's one picture, but can you see Troy? You know where it is. Can you see where it is?
Barely. Yeah,
And even with that, you can't see it. Oh, I'm really sorry, you guys. He's standing. There's a guy that's standing right here, and it showed up perfectly. He wasn't there that night. I was there, and there he was standing there, and now you can't see him. I can show you the picture when you come back. If you come back to my table, I'll show you the picture. I'm sorry, it's really this sort of kind of an anticlimactic ending to this whole thing. But I appreciate your patience with me. We'll just pretend, okay? It was great, wasn't it? Oh my God, didn't you get freaked out? I did. But anyway, if you ever come to Hollywood, you guys have any questions or anything that I can answer, or if you want to tell me to go to hell or something? Anything. Any of this stuff or anything? Any questions? I don't know everything, but I know quite a bit. Yes, sir.
Do you have a plug?
No. My book is my tour. But I do have 2 documentaries. The first one we did, the one we have called The 6 Degrees of Helter Skelter. As I mentioned, it's a geographic retelling of the Tate LaBianca murders. You nice people saw it. And thank you very much. We did it on about, it cost us about $500 to do it. And we did it over 6 months. But I'm really proud of it. And it's been released all over the world. The other one we did called Dearly Departed Volume 1, which was done long before that, which is just this, we went out with a camera and got to some pretty amazing places. Jean Harlow, the Hollywood legend from the golden age of Hollywood, we got into her house where she lived when she died. And those people sold the house. We'll never get in again, so for posterity, we have it. Jack Cassidy, David Cassidy's father, died in a fire. Well, these guys who owned the house said, "You want to come in?" So I said, "Can I bring a camera?" Sure. So we got into it. So we were able to take the pictures of the accident, of the fire, and hold them up and match them up completely. Another spectacular death was a man named Albert Decker, who died in a shower doing something very naughty to himself. And we got into the house, we got into the apartment, and I told the girl while we were on camera what happened in her own bathtub. And it's kind of interesting. So yeah, those are. We also did Bobby Kennedy, the Black Dahlia, etc. Those are my book. So there you are. But if you want to come up and see the stuff, come on up and see the stuff. But thank you very much for your time and for your attention. Oh yes, sir. Sorry.
Anything with Howard Hughes? Have you ever done any Howard Hughes?
The only thing I have, and I do have a piece of the place where his plane crash happened. It was about 1947, I think it was, 46. And he was testing the plane, and the plane crashed into a house in Beverly Hills, and they just destroyed the house. And I have a chunk of that. That's what I have as far as Hughes is. He's out here, isn't he? He's in Houston, isn't he?
Yeah, and his childhood home where he lived with his aunt is actually part of the university now.
Mm-hmm.
They've maintained that portion of the house. Outside of where his bedroom was is now a sculpture. But people always feel funny when they walk through there, and his hangar is still intact in Los Angeles.
Wow.
It's with the corporate office.
Yeah. That is so interesting. He is such an interesting character. I mean, aside from all his business doings, just as a man, he's so fascinating, especially what happened to him. It's so fascinating. But yeah, they say the accident was the beginning of the end to him. He was already messed up, from all the conditioning that his parents provided for him. But after that, he became physically just destroyed. And it's amazing he even lived after that car. I don't know if you know this, but he was test flying a plane, and he was supposed to go around a couple of times to land, but he went, "No, we're just going to go," and he went for like an hour, and it conked out. He was trying to land in a country club in Beverly Hills, and he ended up slamming into 3 houses on a Sunday night, 7 o'clock. These people were just watching, whatever, Ed Sullivan, and bam, comes it wasn't a 47, but you know what I mean. Ed Sullivan wasn't on TV in 47, but I mean, it was just that sort of a thing, and oh look, and Howard Hughes ripped through their house. You ever see The Aviator? Fantastic movie about Hughes, and the way they did that accent was spectacular, really.
Well, a lot of his relatives are still here, and some live in Galveston and some live in Houston.
And they all have a lawsuit against the estate, right? He's my dad. No, he married me.
They invented a die tap that was gave them a fortune, and that die tap is still a major key to all industry here in America.
Wow. That's fascinating. Yeah, talk about someone that changed the world. And the bullet bra. He did the bullet bra. Yeah, Maryland owes a lot to him.
Airstream.
Yeah. He did Airstreams too, the trailers? I didn't know that.
So, yeah, he was an innovator. That was pretty amazing.
Wow.
Yeah, if you're ever in Houston, you can take a tour.
A huge tour.
Yeah, it takes you around the sites.
Oh, there was really an established, like, take the Howard Hughes tour. There's something like that?
No,
Oh,
it's
okay.
just, you can follow along
Uh-huh.
the sites that you just type in Howard Hughes, and I've been walking through those areas so many times.
Oh, cool. Yeah, we're going to go visit his grave. Definitely.
I've never been to his grave before.
Well, huh.
The president of Texas is buried right behind this building.
Is he?
Yeah, William Travis, he's buried like just about 800 feet that way.
Really? We'll have to run over there. That's cool. That's very cool. You guys have such interesting history here.
That cemetery behind this building is the wealthiest and most important people of Texas history and all of Texas.
Wow.
It's called Lakeside.
Okay.
Sorry, Lakeview. It's
Lakeview.
Masons, Freemasons, they're all buried there.
Awesome. Thanks for the
It's
tip.
right behind the building.
I'm going to check it out. Seriously, that sounds awesome. Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone? Anyone? Bueller? Cool.
Okay, now I'm going to touch your stuff.
I've been waiting. So this is the Hindenburg.
Open this guy, right?
Yeah, this is the Hollywood sign. This is the ambassador. Yeah. Where's Sharon Tate? Sharon Tate's over here. Well, I got somebody on the scene there.
Do you really?
Yeah, I do. And this is the Jane Mansfield pool. Oh, do you know what? I think I put the fireplace, Troyish.
Yeah.
Could you? I think I left the fireplace over there. The piece of wrapped up in bubble pack. Yeah. See, this is where the piece came from. Which this was the H, what it looked like, and that's the piece where mine came from. But yeah, you just think, I mean, these awful things, you know, these like this John Denver's airplane, yeah. And this is actually the ceiling of the room that Bobby gave his speech in. The piece of linoleum I wasn't able to bring because it's locked up, but not locked up for no one to see, but it was just a hard place for me to get to. This is the pool, the heart-shaped pool. She was, wasn't she? She was a real stunner.
This one is what?
That's John Denver's airplane. This is the foot of Rock Hudson's bed.
This is the Denver.
Oh, but you know it.
Yeah. And oh, it's for sale. That's the humanity. That's like, how can you live with yourself? Quite well, actually.
One of those things like you have to ask.
No, we just talked about the bed, that's all, and how I came about it. Actually, I didn't even talk about how I got it. Actually, I bought it. Oh, there it is. Thank you. This is a piece of the Sharon Tate fireplace. I sell them. Yeah, there's some of them. Not this particular one, but I have them all packaged up, along with the matchbook from the place where she had her Last Supper. Oh, there's a piece of the Hindenburg. See, that's what it looked like. Thank you, Troy. You can see? That was like so it was a ladder. That's the best I can figure. Yeah, this was the murder happened in front of this. Yeah.
And so when you die in these places, is your cabins, you haven't been just filled with the Holy Jesus or whatever?
No, the only time I ever got really freaked out, I'll tell you, I got startled when I was in Jane's seat, in Jane's car. But the only other time I got really Jane Mansfield, when I was sitting in her car, I got you know. Yeah. But yeah, I know somebody has it, but it went, back it was trailing around. They were doing this, like Jane's car was, you know, to see the Jane Mansfield car kind of a thing. Jimmy's car was like that. When he was killed, they were doing the dangerous driving. This could happen to you thing, and then somebody stole it.
Well, actually, people died. The person that carted off the car got into an accident and was killed. Yeah, the truck driver that was pulling They took the car and they put it in another place. A warehouse burnt down.
I know that I know that a couple of parts were liberated from the vehicle because it was still it was in perfect shape. It only had like 300 miles on it. Yeah, but a lot of those, there were accidents involved with the parts from that car.
Here about 10 years ago.
No, more than that. Oh, guy hasn't been around in 40 years. Oh, okay. I gotta go. I'm gonna bring this over to my table though. If you guys want to go and have a look at it up there. Let me just. It's all this stuff. Yeah. So if you want to come over, this is. But let me get this.